At 61, I keep a tidy house and unshakable routines. So when my 5-year-old granddaughter crept into my kitchen at dawn and whispered that her mother said never to tell me what she saw, routine cracked like a dropped plate. I promised not to tell unless it was about safety, and she pushed her fist-sized hands into her sweatshirt and said the stove was left on while Mommy's friend slept on the couch, blue crumbs everywhere, the baby coughing through the night. You're watching Revenge Files. Subscribe for a new twist daily. I live alone on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, in a small yellow bungalow with a mailbox that leans like it's listening to gossip. My name is Elaine Carter, and I learned years ago to keep spare pajamas, a toothbrush, and a favorite stuffed bunny in a plastic bin under my guest bed. Ruby likes the bunny. She arrived last night in her glitter sneakers, dragging the bunny by one ear while my daughter-in-law, Tessa, idled at the curb with her hazards on. Tessa didn't come in. She never does unless she wants something signed or paid. She cracked the window and called. Just until morning, Elaine, my shift ran over. Then she drove off, as if parenting were an Uber ride that someone else had ordered. This morning, it was still dark when Ruby padded into the kitchen. I was measuring flour for pancakes. She climbed onto the chair and pressed her cheek to my shoulder. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mom told me not to tell you what I saw at home." "Is it about safety?" I asked. My voice stayed even. I have years of practice sounding calm when my nerves snap like dry twigs. She nodded, eyes wide. The stove was on all night, and Mommy's friend had blue crumbs on the table. He took a nap with his mouth open. The baby coughed and coughed. The bag of flour slid from my hand and thumped on the counter. I shut off the burner under the skillet. Where was Mommy? Sleeping in her room. She said I should play quiet. Ruby hesitated. She said not to call you unless there was a fire, but it smelled like the school nurse's office. I've never been a woman who panics. I am a list maker, a collector of paper trails. My son, Mark, jokes that I was born with a label maker in one hand and a pen that only writes in capital letters in the other. But this was not a list problem. This was a phone call problem. I wiped the flour with a hand towel and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I could hear the click of a keyboard. I gave Tessa's address, 1712 Willow Glen, and said the words welfare check, small children inside, stove left on overnight, and possible pills. My voice sounded ordinary, but my heart hammered like a small trapped bird. While I spoke, Ruby traced the palm lines on my hand with one finger. "Will Mommy be mad?" she asked. "She'll be safe," I said. "That's the point." 2 patrol cars reached the apartment in 12 minutes. The dispatcher kept me on the line until they confirmed entry. I heard nothing for 3 long breaths. Then the officer said, "Ma'am, we've turned off the stove. There's an adult male unresponsive on the couch. M's en route." He asked for my relation to the children and told me which officer would call me back with an incident number. But then the call clicked and I was alone with the quiet. I could hear the pancake batter settling in the bowl like a slow sigh. I didn't tell Ruby any details. I just added blueberries to the batter because she likes to watch them burst. By the time I flipped the last pancake, my phone buzzed with a Columbus police number, incident CPD to 2456,018. The officer, DeMarco, spoke steady. 2 children safe. Female adult awake in the bedroom. She's agitated. We found what looks like crushed tablets and a small lit burner. We're securing the scene. Is the baby okay? I asked. Coughing but breathing fine. Medics are checking him. Please note that Ruby has asthma. I spelled it out, then grabbed her inhaler from the shelf where I keep duplicates of everything kids might need. I offered to drive it over. DeMarco told me to stay home for now. We may need you to meet with a caseworker today, he added. Are you willing to keep the kids temporarily if that's recommended? Yes, I said, for as long as needed, I texted Mark. He's a telecom lineman, often working in other states, climbing towers and coming home with windburned cheeks. He called within minutes from a job site in Indiana. Mom, what happened? He asked, the line crackling. When I explained, he went silent, then said, Do what you have to do. I'll be back by Tuesday. By mid-morning, a caseworker from Franklin County Children's Services knocked on my door. Miss Alvarez, early 30s, calm eyes, spiral notebook. She spoke softly to Ruby in the living room, asked if she wanted to color while the adults talked. I made coffee and laid out old notebooks of mine like a nervous salesperson. Vaccination dates, preschool contact information, the list of Ruby's bedtime allergies, everything I knew might matter. Miss Alvarez kept her questions practical. When did I last see the children? How often did Tessa ask me to watch them? Did I notice changes lately? I told the truth. Tessa had been erratic since January, after Mark took a 3-month contract in Kentucky. There were nights when Ruby arrived in mismatched clothes that smelled like a candle store. The baby, Milo, had diaper rash too often to be coincidence. I kept lotion in my purse. But then Miss Alvarez set down her pen. "We'll recommend emergency placement with you for 72 hours, she said. I'll write the ex parte request for the juvenile court judge. If approved, the sheriff's office will serve Tessa a notice this afternoon." I nodded. My hands trembled for the first time. "What about the blue crumbs?" She didn't say a word that would make Ruby look up. She just wrote another note and said, "We'll let law enforcement handle the criminal side." By noon, a deputy delivered a temporary custody order. 1 page, with the judge's signature slanted like a seagull taking off. The order gave me physical custody for 3 days, pending a hearing on Thursday. It required Tessa to surrender the children immediately. A social worker escorted Ruby and Milo back to my house. Around 2, Ruby ran to my little herb garden and announced that the basil had 1,000 tiny leaves. The baby fell asleep in my lap like a warm loaf of bread. Except Tessa did not stay quiet. She called me from a number I didn't recognize, voice jagged. "How dare you? You called the cops on me? You kidnapped my kids and ruined my job." I kept my tone steady. "There's a court order, Tessa. Come to the hearing Thursday. Bring a lawyer if you can." She swore and hung up. A minute later, I heard the ping of a message request on Facebook. 3 paragraphs of blame. I screenshot it and saved it in a folder I labeled May Evidence, dated each file. I am not vengeful by nature, but give me a job and I'll do it. Protecting children is a job. That night, I made a list. It ran 3 pages. At the top, I wrote, threats, deadlines. I called Franklin Savings and asked for statements on the uniform transfers to Minors Act account I'd opened when Ruby was born. Mark and I had each deposited small amounts monthly, $35 here, $50 there. As of December, it held $12,410. In February, I'd noticed a transfer I didn't recognize, but I assumed Mark had moved something for taxes. Now, with my pen poised, I wanted confirmation. The bank manager I'd known for years, Mr. Holcomb, told me they'd require Mark's authorization to discuss withdrawals. I texted Mark. He called Holcomb from his truck, and 3 minutes later, Holcomb called me back. "Miss Carter," he said, "there were 3 online withdrawals in late February and early March, $3,000, $2,000, $500, and $1,800. Logged with an e-signature under Mark's profile from an IP address in Columbus." "That wasn't Mark," I said. My voice came out flat. "He was in Kentucky those dates. Can you send PDF statements? I can email them to the address on file," he said. "There's also a new linked account set up for external transfer under the name T.L. Malone. Tessa's middle initial is Lynn. Malone is her maiden name." I printed the PDFs and highlighted every transfer with a staccato yellow rage that surprised me. I added them to the May Evidence folder with the Facebook screenshots, the incident number, and a note, possible forgery. I slept lightly, waking every hour to check the nightlight ribbon across Ruby's and Milo's cheeks. The house smelled like laundry soap and basil, clean smells that mean you can breathe. The hearing came faster than I expected. Thursday, May 9th, Courtroom 5C. The judge, a woman with careful hair, read the file before we spoke. Tessa arrived late in a tight blazer and smudged mascara, with a boyfriend I recognized from her social media, Brandon. He wore a backward cap and glowered at me like I'd canceled his concert. No lawyer stood with them. Miss Alvarez summarized the welfare check: stove on, tablets found, adult male unresponsive, baby coughing. She noted that hospital tests showed Milo had inhaled smoke irritation, no long-term harm suspected. She recommended temporary custody remain with me pending a case plan. She said it gently, as if handing a glass of water across a tightrope. The judge looked at Tessa. "Do you dispute any of this?" Tessa lifted her chin. "Those pills were vitamins," she said. "Brandon passed out because he works nights. The stove, I must have bumped it. This is all Elaine's revenge because I don't let her control my life." I asked to speak. The judge nodded. My voice stayed low. "I love my daughter-in-law," I said, surprising myself with the word. "But my granddaughter told me she was instructed to keep secrets. That is a line I will never cross. I also have bank statements showing 3 withdrawals from Ruby's Utama account while Mark was out of state, and a linked account under Tessa's maiden name." Tessa's neck flushed red. Brandon muttered, "This is bulls." The judge held up a hand. "One more word and you'll wait in the hall." I slid the statements to the bailiff, who delivered them to the bench. The judge scanned the pages, then looked at Tessa. "Where did this money go?" Tessa bit her lip. "Bills," she said. "Groceries, daycare." Her eyes flickered, too fast. I'd used the same look when I told my own mother I hadn't eaten the rest of the Christmas cookies. The judge issued clear orders. Physical custody of Ruby and Milo remains with MS Carter for 90 days, supervised visitation for the mother twice weekly at the Family Resource Center. Mother will complete a substance use assessment and follow recommendations within 10 days. Mother will not allow any unrelated adult males in the home during visits with the children. Mr. Brandon, you will have no contact with the children pending further review. She initialed each line as she spoke, the pen punctuating consequences into something more solid than air. We'll revisit custody in August. But then Tessa played a card I didn't expect. The following week, she filed a complaint with Children's Services claiming I'd kidnapped the children and forced Ruby to make up stories. A different worker, Mr. Daniels, arrived to investigate the complaint. He sat on my floral sofa and asked if anyone coached Ruby to say scary things. I kept my hands folded in my lap so he wouldn't see them clench. "I bake," I said. I read. "I teach her how basil smells different from mint. That's the sum of my coaching." He smiled a little at that and spoke to Ruby in the backyard. She showed him her chalk drawings on the patio, 4 fat bees and a lopsided house with 10 windows. "This one is Mommy's apartment," she said, and colored the windows black. "This one is Grandma's," and she left the windows open so the blue sky could peek through. Mr. Daniels wrote something on his clipboard and the false report dissolved like a sugar cube in hot tea. I wish it ended there. It didn't. Mid-June, Tessa's boyfriend showed up at my fence line, ripping his cap off and yelling that I'd ruined their lives. "You think the cops scare me?" he sneered. "I know people." I dialed the non-emergency line and handed the phone to him through the slats of the fence. "Tell your people to talk to Officer DeMarco," I said. Brandon backed away with a scoff, but left tire marks the shape of decisions made too fast. I filed for a civil protection order the next morning. The clerk stamped the temporary order, $78 filing fee, and the deputy served Brandon at his mother's house, where he'd been staying since the welfare check. The paper worked better than bravado. He'd disappeared. Except Tessa kept sending messages, late-night apologies followed by accusations at sunrise. I responded only once, all communications through the parenting app recommended by the court. I printed every exchange and saved them. At the Family Resource Center, a woman named Janelle supervised Tessa's visits. After the first session, Janelle pulled me aside. "Ruby hid in the play kitchen," she said. "She wouldn't come out until her mother agreed no secrets. We're documenting." While the case ticked forward, I built a new routine. Mornings started with pancakes or scrambled eggs. We walked the 2 blocks to the park with a wagon, the baby bumping along, Ruby pointing out cardinals with a seriousness that felt like prayer. I stretched my pension farther than I thought possible, Mark sent money when he could. My neighbor, Mrs. Khanna, dropped off rice pudding every other Sunday. The house felt sturdy again, the way a boat feels when you finally turn it into the waves instead of letting them hit from the side. But then Mark came home early. He'd finished his contract, taken a smaller local job. He shaved his travel beard and stood in my kitchen with the bank statements spread like a crime scene. "She forged my e-signature," he said. "It's not even close." He filed a police report for identity fraud. We met with a family law attorney, Andrew Pike, whose office sat over a strip mall nail salon that smelled like acetone and New Resolve. Pike requested a $6,000 retainer. It hurt, but we paid. He subpoenaed the bank's IP logs and drafted an affidavit for the court, attaching the statements, the welfare check report, and Janelle's notes from the supervised visits. He taught us words like contempt, material change, and guardian ad litem. The guardian ad litem, MS Rees, interviewed all of us. She brought wooden blocks and a measured voice. Ruby built a tall tower quietly while MS Rees asked about bedtimes and breakfast foods. "Who helps you brush your teeth at night?" she asked. "Grandma," Ruby said, "and sometimes Daddy, but he sings wrong songs." She giggled, setting the top block straight like a lighthouse. Tessa arrived for her interviews smelling like overripe fruit. She sat too straight and smiled too wide. When asked about the UTMA withdrawals, she said again, "Bills," but her eyes slid sideways. I looked at her and thought of the first time she came to our Thanksgiving. Cheeks rosy, hair shiny, balancing a pie she'd made herself. She was 20 then, and she laughed at everything. She used to hug me tight. People don't wake up villains. They walk there one step at a time. The final hearing in August felt like a second weather system moving through the same sky. The courtroom air conditioner hummed. Papers shuffled. Miss Rees's report landed on the judge's bench with a soft thud. Her recommendations were clear. Legal custody to Mark, physical placement of both children with me Monday through Friday while Mark worked, supervised visitation for Tessa, until she completed a 12-week outpatient program and produced 3 consecutive clean tests. She also recommended restitution for the UTEMA withdrawals and the parenting app to manage communication. Tessa's attorney, she'd hired one by then, argued that Tessa had made progress. She produced a pamphlet from a program and a letter signed by a counselor named Lou, who didn't bother to include a last name. The judge waited for the facts. Mr. Pike handed up the bank's IP log, stamped with dates and times that matched Tessa's work-from-home schedule. He attached Officer DeMarco's incident report and ER notes about Milo's cough. He stapled Janelle's visitation summaries, where words like evasive, minimizes, and redirect required recur like a drumbeat. The judge spoke slowly, as if giving each word time to become law. This court awards sole legal custody of Ruby Carter and Milo Carter to their father, Mark Carter. The children will reside with Miss Carter during the father's work week and with the father on weekends until school starts, when a new schedule will be reviewed. The mother, Tessa Malone, will have supervised visitation 2 hours weekly at the Family Resource Center. The mother will enroll in and complete a 12-week outpatient program within 10 days. The mother will provide 3 consecutive negative tests before this court will consider unsupervised visitation. The mother is ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $12,400 to the UTMA account within 18 months. Minimum monthly payment of $250. The mother will pay child support through wage withholding in the amount of $418 monthly. The court issues a civil protection order prohibiting contact by Brandon Pierce with the minors for 2 years. She signed, "The blue ink underlining our new lives." Tessa cried then, not the pretty tears of movies, but hiccuping, red-eyed sorrow that made my ribs ache with a kind of grief I didn't expect. I wanted to hug her and shake her at the same time. Instead, I packed the diaper bag, buckled Milo into his car seat, and took Ruby's warm hand. Outside, the late August heat rose in waves off the courthouse steps. The sky over Columbus was a hard, clear blue. Mark stood there with his hands in his pockets like the boy he once was when he thought we could solve everything with pancakes and a promise. "We did it," he said softly. "Not finished," I said, "but we're on the right page." We walked to the parking garage. My phone buzzed with a message from the parenting app, Tessa asking if she could bring Ruby a pink backpack at the next visit. "Of course," I typed. Ruby likes the color with glitter. The weeks that followed felt ordinary in a way that made me weep over small chores. We bought Ruby new sneakers for kindergarten. She chose the ones with stars that blink. We bought Milo a second-hand walker that squeaked down the hallway like a shopping cart. I labeled everything in my tidy script: lunch, spare clothes, inhaler. We set a whiteboard by the door with a daily list: brush, shoes, water. The list steadied all of us. But then one Sunday evening in September, Tessa showed up early for a supervised visit and stood in the parking lot with the sun behind her like a warning halo. She wore a simple dress, hair pulled back, no makeup. She held a backpack, pink, glittering. "Can I hug her first?" she asked Janelle. Her voice was small. Ruby tucked herself against my knees, then peeked up. "No secrets?" she asked. "No secrets," Tessa said. She knelt on the pavement and cried into Ruby's hair. I looked away. Some scenes require privacy even when they're out in public. After that, her visits improved. She still stumbled, missed, one for a fever, another for a transport issue, but she kept showing up. She sent receipts of her program fees without being asked. She asked about Milo's cough and wrote down the name of the lotion that finally erased his rash. I printed those messages too, not as evidence against her, but as proof that people can turn toward light when it's offered with steady hands. By November, she'd completed the program and turned in 3 negative tests. She asked for 1 unsupervised hour in a park with a case aid nearby. We agreed. I packed extra wipes and called it a mini adventure. Ruby came back with a paper boat and cheeks flushed from running. "Mommy didn't let Brandon come," she announced, as if it were new magic, and maybe it was. She still slept at my house, still liked the basil leaves and pancakes, but she had a new story to tell herself at night. I am safe. Adults make mistakes and fix them. Secrets lose their teeth in the daylight. Restitution landed in the Utma account in small chunks. $250 here, $300 there, until the balance looked like a wall rebuilt brick by brick. The bank sent a notice after the last payment cleared that made me laugh aloud. Account restored. There are a few phrases more healing. In December, the court reviewed our schedule and allowed 3-hour unsupervised visits for Tessa. She brought Ruby to the conservatory downtown to see poinsettias and a train that circled a tiny winter village. She sent me a photo, Ruby's, palm against the glass, the train reflecting like a streak of light. I saved it in a new folder I labeled Recovery and left it unhighlighted. We celebrated Christmas in my bungalow with hot cocoa and a thrift store train of our own that clacked around the tree. Mark carved a ham and told the kids the story of a tower he climbed in the rain that made his legs shake and how he kept going anyway. I watched Ruby watch him and felt a quiet click inside, the sound of something locking in place. January brought gray skies and steady routines. I started a habit of taping small notes to the inside of my kitchen cabinet. Nothing dramatic, just reminders: call Janelle, check app, breathe. On a Tuesday, Tessa texted from the parenting app. "Can I come by with Milo's new winter hat? It's fox-colored." She had exactly 20 minutes before she had to be at work. I said yes. She stood on my porch in a coat that had seen too many winters and tucked the hat onto Milo's head. He yanked it off and threw it, because babies are honest like that. We both laughed. She stood there a moment longer, shifting from foot to foot. "I hate that you had to be the one to do this," she said. "But thank you for doing it. I didn't say I told you so or I knew you would get here. I just said, 'We're okay, Tessa. Keep going.'" She nodded. She left. In March, the judge dissolved the protection order against Brandon, not because he earned it, but because he'd moved to another state and hadn't so much as tried to contact the children. The court kept the restriction in the custody order, no contact with the children until further order. Sometimes the absence of a man is the safest presence you can offer. By the time summer rolled around again, Ruby could swim without clinging to my neck. She learned to zip her own backpack. She could crack an egg without shattering it. Tessa earned privileges and longer visits. She still made mistakes. She was late once and left me a voicemail crying in a parking lot, but she kept putting the pieces back where they belonged, one by one. That's all any of us get to do. One afternoon in August, exactly a year after the first hearing, the judge signed a modified order, joint legal custody between Mark and Tessa, with me listed as kinship caregiver during Mark's work hours, unsupervised parenting time for Tessa, contingent on continued clean tests, child support adjusted to $392 based on her new wage at the clinic where she scheduled appointments. Restitution complete. The judge's pen moved like a metronome. No one cried this time. We all stood a little taller. Driving home, Ruby fell asleep in her booster, head tilted to the side the way babies do. Milo snored in the car seat with his fox hat jammed over one ear even though it was 85 degrees. Mark followed in his truck. The sun threw long sheets of gold over the freeway, the kind that make you believe ordinary life can look like a movie if you're not careful. Back at the bungalow, I stood in my kitchen and pulled down the whiteboard from the wall. The corners were smudged. I cleaned it and wrote a new list. Pancakes, park, laugh. I added one more line, call Holcomb, because I wanted to ask him about setting up a new savings account in Ruby's name the way I'd done 5 years earlier. This time we'd lock it tighter. This time a secret would never be the currency of a child's silence. Later, after bedtime, when the house was finally still, I opened the May evidence folder one last time. I didn't burn it dramatically or bury it under the basil. I simply removed the pages that still mattered, the final orders, the custody schedule, and placed them in the safe with the passports and birth certificates. The rest I recycled. Paper doesn't hold grudges, it just waits to be turned into something else. Very early the next morning before the kids woke, I measured flour for pancakes and listened to the quiet, the good kind. The mailbox still leaned like it was listening for gossip, but there was nothing juicy to report. No blue crumbs, no secrets with sharp edges, just the ordinary whisper of a life rebuilt, the soft clatter of a whisk, the tiny thump of a bunny dragged across linoleum, a grandmother who finally got her routine back and kept it, not as a shield against the world, but as a promise to the small people growing up inside it.